Yeah, I haven't done any of the Twitch stuff at all. I mean, other than watch Twitch. I
Yeah.
haven't, I've
We're
never
just,
streamed anything.
we are so early in our process of doing it. Um, I need to.
I did a talk on Friday for some kids from Bard College. I have a niece that's going there.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it was fun. Now
Um,
I'm hearing a little bit of echo. So
oh, you are.
yeah.
Hold on. Oh, that's not going to work. Why are you hearing echo?
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, it echoes.
It echoes. Let me turn you down.
It's not super loud, but it was echoing.
Try it
Yeah,
again.
it's better now.
Good.
Yeah, yeah,
I turned my speakers down.
perfect.
Um, okay. Good. I think we're just about ready. I'm going to jump in uh, first and just have everybody um, just uh, yeah, I think I'll jump right into a two top so that you're visible, and I'll introduce you, and then we'll jump into questions.
Great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I will remember just not to ask you anything about money. Because
There you go.
mostly I'm not interested in the fund so much as I am interested in this idea, right?
Yeah, I got it.
So we'll have fun. We'll have
Good.
fun. Great. We got 5 people watching so far, and we're not doing anything yet.
That's good.
Yeah, I know, right? I
You've
really
been
like
doing
it.
a good job promoting it.
I try. I try.
I've spoken to smaller crowds.
Mm-hmm. They can hear us, just so you know. So I'm gonna be quiet now for a sec. Well, hello everyone. Looks like we are missing our friendly friend Ed on stream, but we are here to stream to chat with Ed Freeze about community support networks, peer support networks in the game industry. This is Eve Crevoshay from Take This, and we are really excited to have this Take This Talks Dev Day this afternoon. You can please join us in chat, and I'm going to do a little bit of um, live tech work and see if we can't get Ed up on the screen and so we can see him and say hello, because that would be awesome. So give me one sec here. see. Where are you?
You can't find me, huh?
I can't
Do you have to, do
find you.
you have to uncrop me or something?
Nope. Well, I'm going to leave this meeting and come back to it. One moment. Ed, let's try this again. Hold on. Hi, yep. So I've got video today. Yes, that's really exciting because in the last stream I didn't have video, but now Ed doesn't have video, and I'm very sad about this. And so thanks everybody for being patient while I figure out why the heck that is, because this is all fun. I wonder if any of you who know about this stuff could tell me if it's because... Oh, look, there he is. Oh my gosh. If it's because we're using Google Meets and not Zoom. Oh, look, he's giant too. So we're gonna resize Ed.
I wish I could see it. I only see myself normal size. A
It's
giant
very
in the
funny,
industry.
Ed. We're just gonna stick you in here and hope for the best. There we go. Oh, we lost me on video, but we have you. And that's really what matters. So we're going to stick with that.
Oh my gosh.
And apparently my machine just doesn't like two video feeds at once. But we can hear me, which is the thing that matters. So as I said, hi everyone. I'm Eve Crevoshay. I'm the executive director of Take This. And I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Ed Fries to our channel and to allow him to talk to us about peer support networks. And the reason that I invited Ed on to talk about this is that he is the one of the founders of One Up Ventures, which is funding a number of indie game companies, but is also creating an intentional community around those leaders. And I know from a variety of research and from anecdotal evidence across the industry that these kinds of peer support spaces are super important. And they are one of the things that we think of when we Take This talk about kind of the resilience factors, the protective factors that help people, especially people in this really stressful space of indie game development, be okay and do the best work that they can do. And so we here are wanting to kind of get the wisdom, the accumulated wisdom that Ed brings to the table of his many years in the game industry, and to talk about what goes into these peer support networks and how we can bring them to more people across what is a pretty private and secretive industry for a variety of reasons. And so, Ed, welcome. It's lovely to see your face. And I love your background. I love what you're sitting in front of. I've been in that space, and it's a cool space. And I want you to, just so our audience knows who you are and what your history is in games, can you give a little précis, a quick intro to what you've done in the game industry?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've loved games as long as I can remember. You know, as a kid growing up in the 70s, both my parents were engineers, and they would bring stuff home for me to play with, little programmable calculators, and of course we played card and board games. But it wasn't really till 1977 that the first personal computers came out, and you could actually have your own computer and write your own games. And I was lucky enough to get my hands on an Atari 800 kind of around that time, probably around 1979, and taught myself to program in BASIC and then assembly, and started making games. And that was just super fun for me. A game company saw one of the games I had made, a little Frogger clone, and hired me to to port it to, or basically to make it into something that we wouldn't get sued over. And so that turned into a game called Princess and Frog. They took out everything. They changed everything about the game except for the frog, which is strange. But anyway,
Huh.
when you're imitating Frogger, but yeah, so I worked for them kind of on the side as I went off to college. I did a few more years for them while going to college, and then the whole game industry melted down kind of famously in 1984, and I had to get a real job. Started working at the computer center at the school, and that led to me getting a job at an early version of Microsoft. Did an internship there in '85 and joined full time in '86. And then I spent the next 10 years working on Office products. I was the seventh programmer on the first version of Excel for Windows, and worked my way up as a programmer and manager of programmers through multiple versions of Excel. And then they moved me over to run Word, and I did Word for 10 years. But all that time I was playing games on the side. And it was really the two things that I love to do is programming and games. And I kind of like got to the point in my career at Microsoft where the next job for me was to run a business. And at that point, I was going to have to give up programming altogether. And so, what's the other thing I love? I love games. So I told my bosses, well, I want to run the video game group at the company. There was a small group of really talented people uh, pursuing making Microsoft a leader in the games business. And they needed someone to run their team. And so I said, hey, that's the perfect job for me. My managers disagreed. Multiple vice presidents called me into their offices, and they yelled at me and told me I was committing career suicide. One of them said to me, why would you leave Office, one of the most important parts of this company, to go work on something no one cares about? I love that quote. And fortunately, I didn't listen to them. I took the job, and within a week, I was walking down the streets in Tokyo. The team had a trip planned to go to Tokyo and visit a bunch of game developers, and they're like, "Hey, you're our new boss. You want to tag along?" Yeah, sure. So, went to Tokyo, and after that, I just knew I'd made the right choice. It was so great to run around and meet all these great game developers that I'd only heard about, and see what they're working on next. And so it was super fun. I spent the next 8 years growing that group quite a bit, from about a little over 50 full-time employees up to more than 1,200, and acquiring a bunch of game developers along the way, building up Microsoft's game business, and launching the original Xbox in 2001. And I stayed till 2004, retired at that point. I was turning 40. I have one kid and a second one on the way. It seemed like a good time to go. And I just started kind of helping friends in the game business, working as an advisor and board member as I raised my kids. And that's basically what I did up until a couple of years ago when I started One Up Ventures. And we can talk more about that. So
Yeah.
that's basically the story.
So basically, you've been playing with games and making games since almost as long as I've been alive.
I don't like that the way that sounds, but yeah, that
Well,
sounds.
I'm not. Yeah, but that's amazing. Because you've charted much of the history of the industry.
Yeah, maybe that's why I like to surround myself with these old parts of the game business.
True. Um, that's awesome. Uh, so um, and in when you went to Tokyo at the beginning there, that was where games were being made. Yeah.
Yeah, really, Tokyo. I mean, ever since the crash in 1984, the American game business really melted down, and I mean, it wasn't until the launch of the Xbox, you know, almost 20 years later, that an American-made game console, I mean, was successful, I guess you
Yeah.
could say.
Yeah.
There had been a couple other tries along the way, but um, so yeah, Japan was the place to be if you were a gamer at that time, and there were many very strong teams and very strong developers there.
Cool. Cool. Um, and So now you said, you've come to this point in your career and you decided to create One Up Ventures. Can you tell us just a little bit briefly about what it is? I introduced it, but I don't think I did it justice.
Um, are you going to ask me more questions about so I can tell the story of it, or is this my one
This is
chance?
your one and only chance, Ed.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to take it. I have to step back a little. So, to explain One Adventures. So basically, um, a little over a decade ago, a smart person who will remain nameless, but who Eve and I both know, um, had an idea to start what Eve is calling a peer group, which I like that name. Um, and his idea was, well, he'd seen like different uh, groups of game developers get together, and kind of either they would sort of um, they would just be too small to really be helpful, or they'd get too big too fast, and
Mm-hmm.
then tons of people would pile in, and pretty soon, let's say it was a mailing list. Everybody got afraid to talk on the mailing list because you had no idea who else was out there.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
there's hundreds or thousands of people, you can't. I can look stupid in front of 1,000 people by asking a dumb question. Sign me up. Um, so what this person did that was different was they created a group that was capped at 50 members. And they made it secret mostly just because they didn't want to make people feel bad about not being part of it. And I was lucky enough to be asked to be part of this group. But then there's several groups like this around. It wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
But but anyway, over more than a decade, that group I think grew really close together. The people who were members of it really got to know each other, and that's mostly because the person who started it put a lot of effort into connecting people both electronically but also in person. And I
Yeah.
think the in-person thing's really important. Um, uh, at whatever game conference was going on where there was some significant percentage of the 50 people were there, they'd get together and have a lunch or have a dinner, make sure they spent some time together in person. And after doing that for a couple of years and then talking on email, um, someone said, "Hey, we should get together and do our own conference." And so that was the start of everybody, as many people as possible out of the 50. Usually we'd get about 30 or so of the 50. We'd get together every year and spend a couple days together.
Yeah.
And anyways, and that was, I think, really great. It was great for me. I think it was great for the other people who were part of it. And that group continues on today. It didn't end. But so this was what was in my mind, this experience. And, at the same time, I'm sitting on boards with venture capitalists and being an advisor to companies. And I keep thinking, well, why does that one thing feel so good and this thing doesn't feel like a good match for game development necessarily, And then what happened was I was approached kind of out of the blue by the guys from PUBG Corp in Korea. And they told me that they really wanted to get closer to some developers in the West.
Hmm.
And they
Hmm.
weren't sure what the best way to do that was. But they thought maybe starting a venture fund would be a way to do it. Um, and I thought about it, and then they asked if I would be interested in running it. And basically, I thought about it, and I said, well, how about I pitch kind of a little bit different idea of a way a venture fund could work. Um, and basically, I just stole all the ideas from this other group. So I'm like, I want to make
Don't
50 investments.
50
Go ahead.
investments. So it's even down to the number.
Even I wasn't. There was zero creativity in this at all. Yeah, it was like I want to do 50 investments only in game developers. I want to connect the founders of those 50 companies together so that they can all help and support each other. I want to do in-person events at different places around the world, different game conferences, connect people on Slack and email so that they can all help and support each other. And to their credit, the PUBG guys were like, well, really, like Western game developers will help each other.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really work that way in our country. But
Yeah.
but if you say so, it's like we trust your judgment. We don't really get your idea, but we're going to support you. Was roughly the way I took away from it. It's like, okay, they're gonna support me. And so that was it. So that was we officially opened our doors almost exactly 2 years ago, and started making investments. And so basically, it was like, and it is today. At this point, we've made 20 investments, and we're on our way to 50. So I should, in theory, I should be at 25 by the end of this month to be halfway to 50.
Good luck.
Just because I'm trying to be there for 4 years, but we'll see. I may not make it quite to 50. But another really important thing happened along the way was that a friend introduced me to Kelly Wallach. And
yeah,
Kelly,
I know Kelly.
Yeah, and Kelly's been a really important partner for me in growing this fund, because basically what they said was, well, for people who don't know, Kelly created and runs something called the Indie Mega Booth that buys show floor of big shows like PAX or whatever around the world, and then cuts it up into little pieces and resells it to indie developers. And so they're like, well, you keep talking about this community stuff. You should really talk to Kelly. And so I got on the phone with Kelly, and we immediately bonded, because we're both trying to do some of the same things, but coming from really different angles. And that's what I really liked. I like that she is like younger than me and more indie than me, and has fresh ideas, because all my ideas are stolen from this other group and they work. It's like a model that I know works and is awesome. But she has all these other newer ideas or different ideas to make it even better. And so anyway, so she agreed to come on board part-time and help run the community for One Up Ventures. And she's been a really important partner for me in building the fund.
That's fantastic. So basically, it's proven model plus new ideas, which is always a great injection of energy and excitement. And I'm getting some great comments about the Indie Mega Booth being the favorite part of PAX. And yeah, I mean, it's an exciting and compelling place. And that's, it's that combination of finding the new energy and the new creative spaces, and then inserting them into what is a massive, massive business at this point, the game industry. So you're 20 investments in, and you've got the beginnings of a community, and you have some really stellar investments in included. If you look at the list on your website, I mean, this is a who's who of some of the most illustrious and experienced indie game devs out there. And kudos to you for bringing a lot of those folks to the table, and also a really diverse group, which is a very important aspect of that too. As you bring some of this really exciting group of people together, how are you balancing in that community cooperation and potential competition, and the ways in which you promote a feeling of peer support among those indie devs and those companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. In a way, it feels a little bit like it used to feel when I ran Microsoft's game business, where I had a big portfolio of games in production, and then I'd constantly be, getting pitches on new games and thinking about how they would fit in with that portfolio that was already put together. But in this case, I think I have even more flexibility, as far as what I can bring in. I mean, when I started, it was more about putting in some people and companies that I thought would be really attractive to other people. That,
that makes a lot of sense.
I want to join this community. I want to be part of it. And also really focusing on diversity. And that's something that when Kelly and I talked, it was something super important for both of us. But, diversity has so many different dimensions to it, right? And that's perfect when you're trying to put together a portfolio. It's like, um, all these different aspects of diversity that I can look for putting together all these different aspects. Like an example would be also geographic diversity. Maybe that's something when people think diversity, they don't think that
Yeah.
much about. But, in a community, if I can have people who come from different parts of the world and have different perspectives, different ideas because of that, then they can bring something new and valuable just because of their own background. And so now as we get bigger, I start to see the conflicts a little more. I start to see, well, I'm really overweight in the US and I want to get more European developers there. And so I can focus harder on that. Um, we were 50-50 female founder or co-founder for a while. And now we've dropped a little below that, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to get back to that number or close to it, as an example. Um, and when I do get a direct conflict in, I think, wow, this is somebody that would really add a lot of value to the community. I really like it. But when they talk about the game they're building, it sounds a lot like this game that this other person is building.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those cases, I will just go to the other team and say, hey, there's this other project. Um, how do you feel about it?
Yeah.
Is and really so far every time I've done that, they've said, we're confident in what we're building, and I actually, and they usually know each other. It's like, oh, I know this guy. I got no problem with them. Bring them on in. So, but if there was really a conflict, I try to look for it and test for that a little.
Yeah.
Just as we've gotten to a larger size.
So
Um,
one of the things that brings up for me is that these you the way you describe the original idea that you borrowed, and the way you're describing this is very much a kind of benign dictatorship. You are setting the terms of this community. You are designing it, and it's very carefully curated, right?
So yes and no. So what I would say is I'm picking the members of the community, um, and certainly with Kelly's involvement.
Yep.
But once they're in the community, then Kelly is less of a dictator than I am. Let's say put it that way. So, so Kelly's much more working with them day to day. And by the way, the really cool thing about doing it as a venture fund
Yeah.
is the venture fund itself can fund the community. So unlike that other group where there's no funding for any of the events, like what I was saying, if we were going to have a dinner or like get together, everybody just had to pitch in, to pay for their
Their own
share,
way.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the venture fund itself can fund community events, and it actually generates every year a pretty significant budget uh, that I turn over to Kelly, and then Kelly talks to the community about how should we spend this money to help everybody. And so some recent examples of that we acquired great industry data for both the mobile developers and the PC developers. So they have access to the latest industry data, which is
Oh,
normally unaffordable for small developers.
right. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
we just last week we did a first round of diversity training for everybody, and that was a request again from the community. And Kelly then went off and put it all together. So we did kind of a group 3-hour Zoom session of and kind of intro to diversity training. And then the fund is also paying for additional training hours for each of the companies. Um, so that part is much less of a dictatorship, I hope. The actual, how the budget that's allocated towards the community gets spent for the good of the community.
Right. So the community is generating and identifying its own needs,
Exactly.
and really leading itself once it is curated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the way I'd like it to be. I'm pretty busy focusing on taking lots of new pitches, listening
Right.
to new game companies, and trying to find people who would be a good fit for joining the community.
And
That's really my my
and when
my
you're
role.
looking at companies, are you also thinking about whether they would be the right um, the right fit for this for adding to this community? I mean, are you thinking about whether or not they're going to be good members?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's a very common question that I ask when I'm talking to a potential founder is, how they feel about collaborating with other game developers and what kinds of things are there examples of them doing that in the past and that kind of thing. I find in general in the game business, um, people are very open to that though. I mean, it's just I don't know. I've been going to GDC almost as long as there have been GDCs, and I've just always loved that aspect of it. That people get up there and they give all the secret sauce away. It's like
That's really interesting that you say that because I think of the industry as largely rather secretive um, and insular, and you're describing something really different.
yeah, I think maybe it's this way. Um, like like I would go around, when I was running Microsoft's game business, and even after, I would go around Seattle. I got to know a lot of the different game developers in Seattle pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
and I would often find that they did not know about another game developer right down the street from them, or maybe even in the same building as them. And so use the word insular. I think maybe game developers sometimes are a little introverted or focused on the
Possibly.
things that they're working on. Um, and it's not that they don't want to talk to other people or meet them and aren't open to it. Because what I would do is just say, "Hey, can I make an introduction to these other guys?" And then I'd send an email, and they start talking to each other. Um, and that would be fine, but it's not something that they necessarily would do on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I do think that GDC is an example that once you create a structure for people to connect and communicate and share, they're more than willing to do it. Um, it's just that it's not necessarily in their nature to do it on
Organically.
their own
Yeah.
organically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that totally makes sense.
Yeah. So that's would be how I disagree with you.
Okay. Okay. And
Nicely.
and do you find that in these, I mean, also the network that you're describing, the model and this network, there's built-in confidentiality and an expectation of confidentiality, and I think that is a really important part of any of these kinds of spaces, right?
Yeah, and it comes up from time to time when there's discussions going on our Slack channel, and we do have an expectation of confidentiality for people. But I honestly think that making games is really hard. It's like super hard,
Yeah, it
you know.
is.
And you could lay out here. Let me give you the whole plan on how we build such and such. Here's how to do every little part of it. Um, and that would not be enough. It's so much about finding the right people and building the right company and all the years of experience and expertise that I find that's most people aren't really afraid of sharing, you know, answering people's questions, being
Mm-hmm.
generous with their time and their answers because they know that it takes a lot more than that just to
It
make a game
does.
be successful. Yeah.
That brings to mind as I think about a difference between secrecy and just like, I don't know if it's tunnel vision or myopia or just, like being in your own lane. Um, that that games are still a relatively young industry, and we just don't have a ton of structures around to give us these opportunities to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even more true in this last year, right, with the
Yeah.
pandemic, where the conferences are taken away and we just can't get together and hang out. I mean, we can do it over Zoom, and we've been doing that, for within our community
Yeah.
for the fund. But honestly, it's not the same. It's you can only do so much this way, staring at a screen, and um, it's not the same as sharing a meal together and having a drink together and just having funny stuff happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with that other group, like we would take time off and go for a hike or do something.
That right, and that
I'm,
casual space and time is really different.
Yeah, I remember one time we wanted to go take this hike, and it was down this kind of steep trail, and it was in the winter and it was icy, and they had actually blocked the trail off because trees were had fallen earlier that day from a windstorm. I don't want to make it sound like they're actively falling, but it
Hmm.
was there was an element of danger to what we were doing, and an element of naughtiness by sneaking past the rope and going down this trail. And I don't know, it was just kind of a little adventure, and we got yelled at by the ranger on our way back up and stuff. And it was just like, it's just like stuff happens, and that's like, then you remember about it later and you laugh, and it's like it's bonding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, you need those
You
bonding
know, it's
experiences.
it's hard to have that happen to you on Zoom, other than like my sound went out or something.
Or your camera doesn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
so
Keep trying to
so
turn it on; it won't do it for me.
so I'm looking forward to getting back to
Yeah, yeah. I think we all are looking forward to it,
yeah.
for sure. I have a question from the chat, which is, I wonder if these peer support models and stuff could be better built into game development, education, outreach, and support networks. How do you create that for? Which leads into some of my next questions, which are, you're working with a lot of more experienced leaders and devs. How do we build that stuff into early stage, early career founders? People coming into the industry now.
Yeah, I mean, so just one thing. I mean, we definitely got some very experienced developers early on into the companies that we invested in. But
Yeah.
when I said I think of diversity in a really broad way.
Mm,
I think a diversity of experience level is something that we really want to pursue with the fund as well.
cool.
And so we would like to have some promising up and comers to invest in. I mean, the whole original idea of a venture fund is to take risks, and so
Yeah.
you're gonna take a bunch of risks on a bunch of kind of low probability things. But if you make enough of those bets, then you've got a chance to have a couple of them do really well. And so we need to be making risky bets. We
Yeah.
need to make sure that we have a portfolio of risk as well. And um, so anyway, there's that. As far as the kinds of things that I guess what I would say is I've seen this model work. That's
Yeah.
what I like about it. I've seen this size, this group of 50 work, because it's big enough that you can have a lot of different expertise around
Mm-hmm.
the table on any topic, but it's small enough that you can get together in person, that people can build one-on-one connection and
Mm-hmm.
relationships, and that's the thing that really encourages more openness and sharing. So if it's too much bigger, I think there's problems, and if it's too much smaller. So to me, that's the one thing I would take away is, find a way to build a group that's, roughly that size, and then really focus on in-person supporting the electronic communication. Don't just do it electronically. Those are, I guess, and if you do those things, then I think it can be replicated, in lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know the model that you're talking about too, and I also know, I'm part of some networks that are really important to me personally.
Mhm.
Um, and I wonder what you think about the element of personal engagement in addition to professional, so that you come, basically you show up as all of you,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
bring
yeah.
that part of, you don't just say, hey, I've got this work question for you. You say, here I am.
Yeah. So what I would say for that, I mean, one of the things about that original group, that, like I said, that's still around, is they require that once a year everybody write a short. It's usually a couple pages,
Mm.
um, that talks about what's going on with them professionally and what's going on with them personally. And sometimes the professional parts are pretty short and the personal ones can be pretty long. and so that's part of an important part of the connection and bonding between those people. And it's interesting to see it over a long time, to see it over a decade, and to see, oh, at this point, this person was really having problems either professionally or personally. And then things got better for them. And then, oh, this other person is having problems, And so, the group sort of supports each one through their low parts. And the fact that you've seen people go through a low period and then come out and end up doing something really great, I think is encouraging, to other people. So I think you're exactly right. We're really trying not just to build professional relationships, but personal relationships as well.
That's really powerful. I mean, I think I've talked a lot about vulnerability as a manager and as a leader, showing up as a whole person to my team, because I need to, that allows them to show up as them whole selves and to think of me as a real person, right? And I think that management isn't the only place in which that's a relevant idea.
I saw a quote on that the other day where they said, that sincerity is really the key to success, and once you can fake that, then you can do anything.
Yeah. I really believe it. I mean, I hate the word authenticity, but and it came up in a panel.
You could put authenticity in there too.
Okay.
No, so I'm joking, but yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think the great thing about close friends is you can be yourself, right? Yeah. And we should try to be ourselves as much as possible with as many people as possible, I think. But it's easier said than done. I mean,
it is, and it's scary, and you have to. There has to be some level of trust there, and so that assumption of confidentiality and privacy, I do think is an important aspect of this, even if it's implied. I think it's kind of important. So thinking about how you structure these and how you get the infrastructure, because I think about you talk about the model group that you've described, and there's the wherewithal to get people together, to travel, to show up at conventions, to meet in person, right? And you've got funding to bring your group together. So how do you bring a group of people without those resources? How do we make that possible? I think a lot about this as we try to think about diversifying the industry and really creating space for, there was something that stuck with me in another conversation I was having. There was a woman who was talking about the development of mentorship processes for minority developers, and saying that a lot of minority developers are saying, or underrepresented developers are saying, and leaders, that they don't know what advice to trust because it's coming from people that they don't necessarily trust and don't necessarily have their interests in play. And so how do you create, and that really stuck with me, that comment. And I'm wondering, how do you create spaces that really serve people who don't have access and resources in the same way, and spaces that they feel safe in? I've been ruminating on that a lot, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I mean, the best example I can have is what we've been able to do with the IGDA Foundation, and that's I've been on the IGDA Foundation board since basically Gamergate changed that board into it actually brought us a large amount of funding. First from Intel, and then now from a much more diverse group of sources. But that really allowed us to do this mentor program at GDC every year, where we'd fly people in from all over the world and have them go through this kind of week-long crash course of getting to talk to lots of people in the game business, making connections for them, mentoring sessions, and building up then longer-term relationships that last after they go back. And the IGDA Foundation over the years has built multiple of these, programs. For example, there's a program that is for people who are kind of 2 to 5 years into their career.
Right,
So there's,
right.
not just the new people, but also people who are sort of mid-career, where sometimes we lose actually diverse people at that point.
Yes, for
Um,
sure.
and so IGDA Foundation is really focused on that one issue of supporting diversity within the game business. But it does it, with a lot of the same tools we've been talking about all this time about, building connections and community and bringing people together.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it can go out and get funding, from lots of big companies in the game business to support that work. So that's an example of where we've been able to answer your question. Basically, where does the money come from to do this?
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
and the IGDA Foundation, that is a really cool infrastructure, and I know, that Nika and the board that you're part of are always thinking about how to make that a more sustainable, how to pivot, into a hybrid online and in-person program, how to respond to that. And
right.
but yeah, I think about the long-term infrastructure for spaces that develop with a level of intimacy and trust. And I feel like we're on that road, but I'm not sure we've gotten there yet in these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, we just had our biggest year ever in IGDA Foundation, kind of
Cool.
ironically, with Nika Noor's an incredible fundraiser,
She is.
and we've found some amazing support from some new sources as well as lots of existing sources. So I think that we're going to be able to do more than ever,
Cool.
and maybe later this year, certainly next year, we'll be back to doing in-person events because that's very important.
It is really important. Yeah, I think this, this is kind of the question of the pandemic, which we'll get to that set of conversations in a second. But has really highlighted how important these in-person spaces are, and how essential they are to providing access, as long as that's done in a thoughtful and careful, kind of methodical way. Um, and and not just in a, here, let's throw some money in your lap, like, here, let's facilitate this process for you, let's create
Right.
specific opportunities, let's guide you through that, because it can be very intimidating and overwhelming to go into those spaces for the first time alone, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Once we first started to get more funding into the foundation, we tried to set up a grant program where we would fund grants for people who were supporting diversity through various initiatives and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And we found that really didn't work. That we needed to take control and run those programs ourselves and make what we wanted to have happen. We couldn't just sit back and expect somebody's going to show up with a perfect program and then we'll just fund it. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to build the future that you want, I guess.
I think that's really true. I mean, that's what we're doing here. That's what I try to do every day. Um,
Good.
yeah, that's why I do what I do. Um, I think I'd love to get now to kind of to the brass tacks of, like, why I'm talking about this at Take This, right? Why do I care about peer support networks? And we've talked about vulnerability, we've talked about trust, we've talked about friendship. Like, what do you see? How do you understand the link between mental health and peer support?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question.
Not to put
I
you
don't,
on the spot or anything.
I don't feel like I'm a mental health expert, but then when I look back, I've certainly had a lot of personal experiences, with close friends and people I've known in the industry,
Yeah.
and that have reminded me, how common mental health issues are, and how difficult and scary they can be for the people involved, and also the people who, are friends with the people who are involved. And yeah, um, I think that what you guys are doing is really important. I think it's important to let people know that this is actually a lot more common than people think, and that
Totally.
it doesn't get talked about as much as it should. And it needs support for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that to answer the leading question that I asked unfairly is that I really see these communities and peer support as part of as a resilience factor, as a,
Yeah.
when you have community to draw on. You describe these personal updates that people give in this, this network, and that sometimes shit happens, right? And to know that you can show up and like that be part of how you show up, and you don't have
Right.
to ignore it, you don't have to, that's a really powerful experience and a really powerful opportunity. And uh and it isn't like your mental health or your challenges are separate from what's going on in your workspace, right? They're gonna bleed in, especially if they're a big deal. And to be
Yeah.
able to, right, kind of manage those all together, that's a gift, I would say, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And, we have, hopefully a group of friends around us that's, close and is a good support,
Yeah.
our family. Um, but then, we can have sort of rings of support in our career as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, I was just exchanging mail today with an old boss of mine, my first boss at Microsoft.
Hmm.
And it's nice to have those connections and build them up. I really remember pretty vividly when I first started to get back into the game business in the mid
Hmm.
90s and started going to Game Developers Conference. And at first, the industry seemed so large. And so, I just couldn't really kind of get my head around it. And then after spending, I'd say probably a couple of years, meeting with companies and going to conferences and things like that, it all sort of closed up for me. It was
Mm-hmm.
like all of a sudden I could see all the way around it.
Hmm.
Um, and I realized it's not that big at all. I could see, it was like, I don't know how else to describe it. It was like all these different connections all of a sudden like all met. I was like, oh well, that's just, it was like the 7 degrees or whatever. It was like
Yeah.
it all kind of came together, and it's like, oh, this is actually, because he knows him and she knows him and her, and it just went. um Now the business is quite a bit bigger, but I still think it's fundamentally pretty small.
Yeah.
And if you can make those connections and sort of see around the whole way, you can realize there's lots of good people at lots of good companies, and they're all really willing to help and support each other.
Yeah, with a few exceptions, but yes, I agree. I want to get back.
It was just so funny you said with a few, because that was like, I remember walking. Had been working with Kim Swift, one of the designers of Portal, and we were at GDC one year, and just like people kept coming by, and
Mm-hmm.
where we were standing, and I'd talk for a few minutes, and then they'd go on, and I'd say, oh, she's really great, or oh, he's amazing, or whatever,
Uh-huh.
and and then after that happened, I don't know, maybe 10 times, she's like, you say that about everybody. And I was like, almost everybody. Yeah, almost everybody. So,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, in general, people tend to be good, and that's really awesome. Um,
they do in my experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, good. Um, I want to go back, and this is I think will be a fun way to kind of wrap things up before I ask you about your pandemic life. Is because I gotta um, um, talking about like it's you talked about how making games is hard. Yes, we know that it really is, and there that can create certain mental health challenges. Like people, and there's been some people who've talked really eloquently about how the experience of making games or the experience of having a hit or a failure has really affected their mental health in profound ways. Um, and I wonder if that has changed over the years. Like I wonder if as the industry has gotten bigger and less niche, if that has evolved in any way from your perspective.
Well, I think a few things have changed, and some things are the same. Um, I mean, I think the thing that's changed is that it's really easy for people to be super accessible to their fans if they want to be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that isn't necessarily a great thing for everyone. And I see
Mm-mm.
people learning that lesson, um, and fans connected to you on through an anonymous, communications channel, can be terrible. you know,
Yeah.
they can be really terrible. And so if that's not what you're looking for, don't do that. You know, so I think what's that accessibility, is something people should. I don't know. Maybe they should just get training before they go on Twitter or something, or you know, just make themselves that available. Um, but what's the same is we're doing hard things. It was hard in the old days. It's super hard now. It's hard for some of the same reasons and some different reasons. And you look at something like crunch, which crunch is really looked down on. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Crunch, I've had experiences where crunch was part of the adventure. And I don't want to feel like I'm defending what can often be a really bad thing, but um, you know, I talked about like going down that icy path that we were, it's like I've been on projects like that where the thing that really brought the team together was like going through this difficult time on the project and surviving, being stronger and coming out the other end and realizing we can do anything if we really try. Um,
Mm.
but I've also, it took me a while to learn that crunch, kind of like we were talking about with the community earlier, works best if it's something um, that as a manager you present, hey, we have this problem. What do you want to
What do
do
we
about
do?
it? Yeah, what do we do together about it? And there was a time on Word when we were in that situation, and I tried a bunch of things. I was in my dictatorial way to try to get us back on schedule, and none of them worked. And then finally, I was so desperate, I went to actually the people who were working on my team every day instead.
Oh.
I know, it's such a crazy thing, and said, what can we do? And they came up with this, thing I never would have come up with on my own, which we called Workaholic Wednesday, which was basically we did a single day crunch every week, and it was really intense, but it
Mm.
was one day, and because of that, everyone knew they were going to have the rest of their time, the rest of their days. And that one day they could tell their family, I'm not going to be home tonight because we're going to work till 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning or
Wow.
whatever,
Wow.
you know, but it was like, it was a group choice on what's the best way to handle this problem. And it
Mm-hmm.
worked, you know? And so, I think, anyway, I think that's a reminder to managers to work as part of their team.
Yeah, well, I think, we take this a lot about the difference between like short term, a bug, essentially bug or milestone related crunch, and
Yeah.
cultural crunch, which is the kind of insidious, this is the way we do things here all the time.
Yeah.
Everything's always on fire, as opposed to let's solve this problem together in the short term. And
That I had mentioned this boss that I was exchanging
yeah,
email with
yeah.
earlier, Chris, and one of the things that really made him a great manager was one thing was he set an example. He came in, he worked really hard for 8 hours, and he went home,
Mm-hmm.
and he created a system where everybody could do that,
Yeah.
and that's what was expected, and and a lot of that had to do with process. A lot of it had to do with a really strict scheduling process. And at first, the scheduling for us programmers seemed like, why am I having to spend time dealing with this scheduling stuff? Can't someone else do that for me? But really what he taught us was that we needed to take control of it ourselves and own it. And then it was actually like a tool to protect our project from going crazy, going
Yeah.
off schedule. Um, you know, we had designers too, and a designer would come to you and say, "Hey, I had this great idea for a new feature," and because of the system that he had set up as an individual person on the team, we could say, "Great, tell me about your new idea," and then you'd say, "Okay, I think that's going to take about 2.5 weeks to do.
Yep.
Show me what other 2.5 weeks you want to take out of the schedule. What other features, that we've already agreed, because the schedule's full. So, I'm happy to do your new feature. Just you decide which part to take out, and we'll take that
It's
out."
how to avoid
Um,
scope creep 101,
yeah,
right?
and it really was empowering to us,
Yeah.
especially like a new person on the team. It was like, you know, they're going to come in and try to convince me to do this thing. Nope, we have a very clear system here. Here's how it works. you know and so setting up the right systems, I think, is really important too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. Yeah. All right. So just a fun way to end our stream, because we always do this. First, I don't know how fun this is. How have you been managing the pandemic? And we're a year in, right? Are there things in your life that have changed without you realizing it initially, or things that you've kind of consciously adapted to? I'm really curious about
It,
this.
yeah. So a few things. One, I'm a kind of an introvert to begin with, and
Mm-hmm.
so spending more time is like, oh, you're going to be locked in this room where you can spend time with your computers and your arcade machines. It's like, oh, sign me up. You know, I'm up for that. I normally travel about 70,000 miles a year, roughly,
Ooh.
and this last year I flew 0,000 miles. So, that really was some, like, I mean, we talked about the negative things of not being able to spend time with people face to face, but the positive is I have more time for my family, more time for my projects, all
Yeah.
that. So that's been good. My 18-year-old was supposed to go off to college, and it was a little weird. He did his high school graduation. We did it in a field in cars, but
Yeah.
it worked. And he's it's not good that he's doing his first year of college remotely, in the sense that he doesn't really know what he's missing. But
Yeah.
the flip side is he doesn't really know what he's missing. I mean, he's actually really enjoying it and having a great time, and I love it, because for me it's like a whole extra year, with my kid, who
Yeah.
I think is a really cool dude, and I like to hang out with him.
He is a cool
So
dude.
so for me that's been a plus. We now do a 1 hour FaceTime call, my brother, sister, and me, with my parents. And we
Mm.
never did that before the pandemic. So
Yeah.
every Sunday we're on for an hour on FaceTime, 11 to noon. It's established where we all know we need to be there, and we're there. And so that's been good. And then we've also been doing like family walks around the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been nice, a nice addition to our normal life too. So I think it has made us put in some, kind of new traditions that we'll keep because they've been positive.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I think I found the same in our family. Both new rhythms and strange things that we didn't quite expect. My 10-year-old is, making remote school work the best she can. Not thrilled about it, but
Yeah.
making it work. Um,
I think my 16-year-old prefers it actually. But
oh yeah, I wonder. But I think one of the things we've done a lot more of is play games.
yeah.
Um, yeah. What do you
Yeah,
play?
we're very into Genshin Impact. That's been the game for us the last
Oh.
few months, and it's a really beautiful game. I mean, it's the kind of game that sometimes it just catches me off guard.
Mm,
I'll be standing on the edge of this cliff, looking out across, this incredible scene, and the sun is setting. And it's just like, I've got in my head, my gamer head is like, oh, I need to go collect 3 more of these and go do that or whatever. And then it just kind of jolts me awake. And I like, wow, look how beautiful this scene is,
yeah.
you know? So it's a really neat game, and it has a multiplayer aspect, sort of that you can opt into, right? So you have this huge open world you can go and explore, but then you can play together. So like every Monday, there's a few big bosses that are available. You have all week to fight them once, and they drop one treasure
Mm.
a week, and so. There's one boss in particular that gives me trouble. It's called Child for the people who know the game, and so yeah, I just I went down for lunch today, and with Xander, I was like, "Hey, help me with the child fight." And he's like, "Okay," and he jumps into my world. No, he was fine, and and we did it together, and we had a good time. So
That's great.
so all three of us boys in the family are playing, and we're all exchanging stuff and helping each other. And yeah, that's been our super cool game for the
That's
pandemic.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, my daughter and my husband are replaying Zelda Breath of the Wild together.
Right,
Um, the
which is
first
sort of, for people who don't know, Genshin Impact is basically Zelda Breath of the Wild but with a mobile kind of game, free to play mobile architecture wrapped around it.
wrapped around it. Yeah, I thought
Except
they
the
were
world
similar.
is probably, I don't know, several times larger than Breath of the Wild.
Mm.
Um, so there's a lot there to explore.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I think they're really having a lot of fun, and it's fun to watch Arya as she gets older, kind of be more and more capable and engaged. Um, and yeah, yeah.
10 years, can't believe it.
10 years on Wednesday. 2 days from now, she'll be 10.
Uh,
I'm having a moment about this.
I bet.
Um, oh, and I cannot leave a stream without asking you about your favorite Italian food.
I saw that on the question list.
Yep.
I do like Italian food. As you
Mm-hmm.
know, we have a kind of a world-class Italian restaurant down the street.
I know.
People don't know, but you and I live like a few blocks from each other.
It's
Um,
extraordinary.
and yeah, so we're talking about a restaurant called Cafe Juanita, and the woman who runs it, Holly, she's actually been on Iron Chef a couple times. She actually won Iron Chef, and anyway. Um, but so yeah, during the pandemic, they've been doing these sort of takeaway things where you can go and get food, and then you take it home and you cook it, which
Mm.
I don't think I could do, but my wife has been done a good job of. But the two things I'm going to say are my favorite are I think I could cook, and one of them is cook. One of them is prosciutto, which I
Mm.
love prosciutto.
For sure. Yes.
Uh, um, and they have some really good prosciutto there. And then the other thing is tiramisu dessert.
Ah, yes. Yes.
So those are my two choices.
My choice is context specific, and it is a fresh margarita pizza with fresh arugula on top, served on the beach in southern Italy.
Oh, I didn't know this includes a location.
Well,
Okay.
it's the thing is that it's tied. It's the whole experience. And I think it's as much about
Mm.
my desire to travel again as it is about the food itself.
I too am looking to ramp up my travel once I'm vaccinated. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed. I'm very excited. Ed, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and I wonder if you have anything last thing you want to leave us with, because I feel this has been a very thoughtful conversation. I appreciate it.
Um, I just want to thank you for having me on and for the
Absolutely.
people who watched. And I think that we were talking earlier about kind of building the future that we want, and
Mm,
that's why I support IGDA Foundation. And I think take take this is really another piece in the puzzle that we need to support game developers and
thank
make
you.
the world a better place.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed. I very much appreciate it, and it was a lot of fun. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. And I wish you fortitude and safety in the remainder of this pandemic.
All right. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.